Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. I welcome you all in my class. Today we are going to start our lesson from Unit 3, Duty and Responsibility, Lingkuan Gorge. This is a story, as you all people all know, that we have covered our lesson from the Bajla Fakhr and the poem That As If. Now we are going to start our story from Lingkuan Gorge, that is on page number 94. So reading selection 3.2, Lingkuan Gorge, a man should never leave his post. Very important. So as you know that the title of the lesson, that is not only about Lingkuan Gorge, it's a gorge that is a symbolic one as well. A man should never leave his post. That is in fact the title, the subtitle that is having a significance in it. We'll see in the story what is so significant about this thing. As the title reflects the story's central message. What is that central message? A man should never leave his post. The central message that is delivered by a young boy standing and watching over his father as well as his little sister. The title highlights the central moral of the story, the importance of standing by one's duty and responsibility. So as you all know that the unit name is also duty and responsibility. So when we come towards this title of the story, it is the symbolic one as well. The important message has been delivered by a young boy who just delivers that a person shouldn't leave his duty in any of the condition at any cost. So the story is by Tupeng Cheng, that is a Chinese writer. By the end of the lesson, definitely you will be able to understand the model and legal obligation in general. Okay, the model and legal obligations in general mean what we ought to do, what is the task that is assigned to us. We should abide by all these things. Any person who is devoted, who is dutiful towards his job, definitely he is going to be successful, as slow and steady wins the race. On the other hand, when you are assigned any duty in any of the circumstances, you must perform all those things. What is the theme of this lesson? A particular task or action that a person is bound to perform is the legal and moral responsibility. It is up to that person. It becomes the responsibility of that person that he has to fulfill that thing that is being assigned to him. On the other hand, this boosts a person's self-esteem and self-worth. I mean, what is that? That working with commitment, it doesn't mean that it is only going to benefit you, but it means that it doesn't mean that it is only to it is going to be beneficial for the other, but also it is going to be beneficial for you as well, that you are going to your self-esteem, your worth, on the other hand your worth and your respect, that is going to be elevated as well. As when we perform any duty with our wholeheartedly, definitely we become more, you can say, efficient and better in our working. So I think that the motto of the story, the aim of the story, that a man should never leave his post, it has a great significance, and if we just adopt this motto in our life, we could be very successful. So let's start. Before starting about the story, let's see it about the writer. After growing up in a poor family in the province of Shanxi, it is also Shanxi, Tupeng Cheng, born 1921, worked as a correspondent for the New China News during China's civil war in the late 1940. So he had confronted the poor situation or the pathetic situation in his life in his early days, and even when he just started writing, he has witnessed many of the obstacles of the life, as China's civil war, when they were working hard for their independence. His many notes about battles he witnessed became important source for his later fiction, including his acclaimed war novel Defend Yan'an, published in 1940, in 1954. Okay, so what he has witnessed, what he has observed in his life, the truths, the bitter truths, or the battlefield, or the what he has learned, he has listened, the noise of the weapons, he has delivered all these things in his novel, winning praise throughout China for his depiction of military life, for the depiction of all the army life, to enjoy a flourishing career throughout the 1950s. In 1958, he published his next major novel in peacetime, which describes workers constructing the Walkie to Chengdu, Baozhou to Chengdu railway. Two fell from fever in 1960 when the government rewrote its history and condemned several former leaders from whom too has praised in his fiction. His work was banned in China until 1978 when a thaw in the nation's totalitarian regime allowed Tao to resume his writing career. So what happened? I mean, when he was not able to, when he was not in a better condition, he has been banned to write stories, as he has appraised, he has given good words for some of the leaders, former leaders, but as far as the government was concerned, later in 1978 he has been banned. His work has been banned until 1978, until there was some movement, there was a change and leniency on the part of the government, and he has to adopt, he just continue to writing his career. So let's start from page number, if you have your books with you, let's start from page number 94. Okay, so the story is of it is telling us about the duty and devotion, and the narrator is material department chief overseeing a future railway project. Okay, so what is the background of the story? The narrator of the story is a materials department chief overseeing a future railway project. He is saying he is taking care of the future railway observe, and he has to travel so far away in some destination. While he has to take rest on the way, he just came across, he just got the company of a young boy who was standing by the doorway, and during his conversation he just got the secret of the life. What is that secret of the life? The narrator was inspired by the dutiful attitude of that boy, and dutiful attitude of that determined boy, and he just, you can say, he just got that all motivation from that little boy. So let's find out where the narrator was going, and what did he listen, what did he learn from that boy. So let's start. The snow, already more than half a foot deep, obliterated the line between earth and sky behind a hazy white curtain. So what happened? That the snow that was no half a foot deep, and it was covering, it was destroying every trace of the line between earth and sky. It was so hazy because all the things were being covered by the snow. I had been following the path of the future railway for 40 kilometers. Although I could hear the roar of machinery further back in the hills, I had seen neither sites nor worker. So what we come to know? We come to know that the narrator, he is just have his own way towards some, you can say, campaign, towards some task that he has to see the machinery, or he has to visit a site or workers. So what does he say? He says that as the weather was very rough. Okay, in fact the narrator is the chief of the material department depot. His job is to supervise all the ongoing construction work for the future Poki Chengdu railway. Okay, so the weather is intensely cold due to continuous snow falling. It is not the physical condition of the weather that were not favorable, that writer could continue his journey. Entering Lingkuan Gorge. What is gorge? Gorge is in fact a narrow, you can say, that is a narrow passage between two hills. Okay, it is a narrow passage between two hills. My irritation increased even in clear weather. In this gorge, in this narrow passage, the sun never shone. It didn't matter that whether where you looked up along the twisting course, the most you could see of the sky was a patch no bigger than the palm of your hand. No, it was dusk. Dusk means twilight or darker part of the. It was the you can say evening. It was the nightfall. It was dusk, and the swirling snowflakes. Swirling mean that were spinning. Swirling mean spinning. Snowflakes, that are the you can say some balls of small balls of snow. And the gale mean that is a strong wind, that is chilled one, made every step a struggle. So what is the physical condition of the weather? He says that entering Lingkuan Gorge into that narrow passage, it increased my irritation as he was on his way, and the weather was not favorable. He was tired, and he hasn't reached towards his destination yet. But how was the weather? The weather was not pleasant. It was not favorable. Even it was not favorable, but he says that even it could, if it could be favorable, the weather could be favorable, the gorge, that narrow passage, it has never seen the sun, because as it was so narrow, it was being surrounded by two hills, so sun couldn't shine clearly in that gorge. So he says that it didn't matter ever. But as no, it was so snowy, it was a very harsh weather. No, so he says that what I could see of the sky was a patch. What he could see, the sky was like a patch that it was of the size of the palm of his hand. Okay, so I mean, what was this? If you just stand below the sky and you want to see the sky, you could the sky is just having no limits. It seems to be that as far as your eyesight or your vision is going to be work, you can see all those you can see the sky is far ahead and ahead. It is expanded, it is having no limits. But he says that as far as that gorge is concerned, it was so small that the sky seems to be like a patch, and it is like patch mean a piece, and it is not bigger than a palm of his hand. That as the palm आपकी जैसे हथेली होती है, it is not having the more size of that, mean as the sky was not visible completely. No, it was late time, it was getting dark. Dusk mean it was night. No, it was going to be night. And the swirling snowflake, as the weather was very harsh, and the gale and that wind that was blowing, it was so harsh, it made every step of him struggle. So what was the physical condition? The physical condition that were leading him to take a rest for a few hours are the cold, twisting courts mean that he has mentioned, with more than a half foot deep snow, darkness, intense hunger, irritation that has cast upon entering Lingkuan Gorge, tiredness due to tough journey, and swirling snowflakes and gale making every step a struggle. Gale mean that wind, because of that wind it was not easy to take first step further, posing a threat that while stumbling he is liable to fall into some deep ravine. So what is going to happen next? Construction in the gorge was very busy. And it seems to be in the noise he was listening, that the construction, as they were working, all the workers were working on the future railway project. It seems to be that everyone is busy in his work. Everywhere people were at work. Generator, cement mixer. Sorry, I couldn't turn the page. Yes, everywhere people were at work. Generator, cement mixer, air compressor shook the ground. Hundred of the light bulbs. Okay, hundred of light bulbs gleamed. They were shining. A small beam or glow of light. Very small beam. I mean, it seems to be that momentarily it is giving light. Dim and yellow. Electric wires, okay, what he could see, electric wires crisscrossing mean it was having that in a crosswise pattern, like a giant spider were scarcely visible, but I could see the overhead cables and their pulley cars sliding back and forth loaded with materials. Okay, so what was the condition when he entered into the gorge? How the people were determined, how the people were busy in their work? He just gets that he just gives us the description that everyone seems to be busy, as starting from the generator, cement mixer. Everyone was working hard. On the other hand, 100 of the light bulb that were just lit, that were working there, but it seems to be very dim because of the weather. Number one, because it was a construction place, so definitely that construction site, it was being on the one hand the weather was not very pleasant, the weather was not favorable. On the other hand, the dust being cast because of that mixing of the cement and all those things, and it seems to be so dim, the light seems to be so dim, although they have managed all those things. The writer continues with his condition: hungry, cold, I tripped and fell. Scraping my hands enough, I had to find some place under a cliff, out of the wind, and just a few hours. If I reached the materials depot tomorrow morning by 10 o'clock, that still wouldn't be too late. Stumbling around in the dark like this, I was liable to fall into some deep ravine, and that would be the end of this materials department chief. I would have to be put on the used up list. So what was the condition of the writer, of the narrator? As I have told you people earlier, that as he has gone through the tough journey and the swirling snowflakes, so he was hungry, he was being thrashed by that cold. I tripped and fell, and he couldn't take his you can say he was stumbling, and he was not moving properly, he was not having steady walk. If I had I would find some place under a cliff. So he is in search of some place under a cliff where he could hide himself, or where could he hide himself from that harsh wind, from that snowflakes, out of the wind, and rest a few hours so that he might take some rest. If I reach the material depot tomorrow morning by 10 o'clock, as he has to take some rest, and by 10 o'clock he has to visit that place, as then it still wouldn't be too late. But if he is not going to find that place, stumbling around in the dark like this, as it was getting dark, the time was of the, it is going to start the night, so stumbling, not standing on his feet, ladkhadate hue, if he is going to fall into some deep ravine again, is that is like a gorge, that is a deep chasm, किसी गहरी घाटी में या गहरे you can say gorge, he is going to fall, then it could be the end of that. This materials department chief, I would have to be put on the used up list, and he would be going into his life is going to finish in that way. So what he says, that he has to take some rest if he was liable to fall into some deep ravine. In these condition, he was being in all these condition, as all these condition rest added up towards his restlessness and irritating attitude, and he wanted to rest for a few hours in some shady place under a cliff. As he is the chief of the material department depot, so his job is to be there. He has to reach that material department by 10 o'clock in the morning to attend his duties. If he couldn't make his way due to his tiredness, due to all those out condition, definitely he was not going to survive any longer. So what details are? I noticed a path leading to a cave in the cliffside. So he noticed a path that was leading to in a cave in that cliffside where he was going to take shelter. A door curtain hanging in the entranceway showed that the cave was undoubtedly occupied by workers. So the cave door was being covered by you can say some sort of curtain, and definitely it was being occupied by some workers. grasping branches along. So he took the, you can say, sport from some branches along the steep path. I hauled myself, I just took myself into that, myself to the door and entered. Okay, so he dragged himself, as he was tired, as he was feeling hungry, as well as he was feeling cold. So it was to haul, it was to like to drag or draw something with the effort. It was he just took himself into, like he was taking something very heavy. I held myself up to the door and entered. He just took him by force himself towards the door and entered. Strange. Seated on a small stool in the doorway was a little boy. So how, to whom did he see? He just observed a boy, a little boy, 7 or 8 years old. So what was his age? He was 7 or 8 years old, elbow on his knees. So what was his just posture? He was just sitting, he was his elbows were resting on his knees, supporting his face in his hands. His cheeks were red with cold. He had been peering at the opposite side. He had been observing at the opposite side cliff through a rent in the curtain. Okay, through a hole in a curtain. He glanced at me briefly as I came in, then went back to his observation. So who did he just confronted a you can say a boy who was observing out of from that rent, from that opening, a breach, or like a hole from that breach. He was observing outside. The cave was large but quite warm. It had a stove and eating utensils. There was something to eat. On the wall above a bed was a colored new picture of a chubby children pulling the turning. So it was being covered by the newspaper, and there was a New Year picture of a beautiful children. Chubby mean that is a healthy one, pulling the turnip, who was just taking that turnip. All the walls has been prepared with old newspaper, now blackened by smoke from the stove. Was not anybody home? I asked, shaking the snow from my coat and hat. So what is the first question of the writer? Why isn't anybody home? Why isn't anyone in the home? So what do you expect? The little boy turned his head. His eye flashed. Flashed mean it could be that it were like moving rapidly like a flash. He gave an instant look in a very weird manner. Anat anybody uncle? Anatai anybody uncle? So very quick response. He says when the narrator asks him, is no one in your home now? So he says that Anatai anybody uncle? I'm not that anybody. If there is no one, so it doesn't mean that I'm not that one anybody. He rose and walked towards me, and sorry, I just missed the page. Yes, he rose and the little boy he rose and walked towards me, his hand behind his back, his chest extended as if to say, not only am somebody, I'm very grown up somebody. So it seems to be that he wanted to say that it's not that I'm somebody, I am the person that who is grown up, who is responsible. I cupped his round little face in my hand. You're pretty sharp, young imp. Young imp mean that he is giving a small, like a mischievous child, that you are small, you are pretty sharp, and you are very imp mean you are very it is used in that you are a mischievous child, you are very naughty. He pushed my hands aside, doubling up his fist. He cocked his head to one side and demanded, who are you climbing up? I have a name. Pointing at the baby girl asleep on the bed, he informed me, her name is Pong Cheng, mine is Cheng Yu. Okay, so just see the response of that little boy. So what is the attitude of little boy? The little boy, that is the Chang Yu, that he just named himself. Chang Yu, that is the name of that little boy. He is in fact the central character of the story. The whole story revolves around him. He seems to be, till yet he is no doubt 7 or 8 years old, but his spirits are so high, and he seems to be having a sense of, you can say, responsibility, as well as a very quick and sharp person. So when the narrator sees that little boy just sitting there, and he asks him that if there is no one at home, the quick response of that is that don't you see that I am some who should be at home? Okay, so it means that he in fact minds the remark of the narrator that struggles at, he suggests that as he is nobody. So he rises and walks towards the narrator with his hands behind his back and his chest extended, as if to say that not only I am somebody, but also I am a grown up mature person, right? On the other hand, the writer just makes some joke, and the little boy again doesn't like that thing, and he just tells his name by showing his mood, that his name, what is his name and what is his sister name. That is his name, her sister name is Pao Ching, and her name is Cheng Yu. No doubt about it, these kids were like thousands of other I had met, born and raised on construction sites, as they were the children of the laborers. The workers liked to name their children after the projects they were born. Cheng Yu, probably the first seen the light of the day on the railway project between Chengdu and Chongqing, also known as Yu. His baby sister Pao Ching very likely had been born right here at the site of the further Paoku Chengdu railway. So what he is saying that it is not the very first time that he is being encountered by some of the kids that belong to some laborers, but it is like that he had met many of the children before. And what is so special about their names? It is about because most of the laborers just name their children on the projects they have worked, and he just gives us the description about the Cheng Yu, that might be Cheng Yu would be that had been the born that has been given the name of that railway project between Chengdu and Chengqing. And his baby sister, on the other hand, his sister is being named by that project Paoki Chengdu. I sat by the stove, smoking and rubbing the drying mud from my hands. Cheng Yu crawled onto my lap and looked into my eyes. "It's going to snow tomorrow, uncle?" I pressed his icy little nose. "As soon as we get our telephone line connected up with heaven, I'll ask for you." So again, the writer just takes his question in a very light mood, in a very light tone, and he says, as far as the weather forecast is concerned, if I am going to connect my lines with the heaven, it seems to be if I am going to get some news from heaven, from God, then I am going to tell you what will be the weather tomorrow like. Angrily he leaped on and stood a meter away, scowling me in a very angry mood at me. Quit you kidding me? Leave that joking. You have got a newspaper in your pocket. Why don't you look at the weather report? So it is not that besides that his age, the child age, that is only 7 to 8 years, but he is a good observer as well. He gives his gesture of anger or disliking first of all by suggesting that he is someone who is grown up. Then he just tells the names of him and his sister, and the third response of him then when he asks for the weather, and the writer just takes this in a very lighter way, or he just remarks in a very, you can say, humorous way in his own way. And the boy didn't like that, and he suggests that you have your your newspaper with you, and you might just see that what that newspaper is saying about the weather forecast. He resumed his seat in the doorway, clamped his elbows on his knees, and rested his face on his hand and peered out through the rent. Through that, you can say hole, you can that opening. When I asked him where the kettle was, he ignored me. I certainly was sorry I had offended my small host. What do you want to know about the snow, Changchu? I asked him. Is it because you can't go out and play when it's snowing? So the writer concern or the narrator concern just at the very first beginning, it is like that the kid is asking, the 7 or 8 years old kid is asking about snow, rather he wants to go out to enjoy while playing. But let's see what is the response of that boy. He didn't even bother to look at me. Papa says if it is still snowing tomorrow, we'll have to quit work. I mean, his concern is that if it is going to be snow tomorrow, they have to quit their work. So just see the attitude of that Changchu as who is a child, but his spirits are high and he seems to be having a great sense of responsibility. He seems to be that he is a child, but he is in fact responsible and performing his duty. Let's see what type of duty what type of job he is performing. And as we can observe, as we can expect, that his response towards the weather for tomorrow would be rather he wants to go out and enjoy, but he in fact narrates that if it is going to be snowy tomorrow, so they have to stop working. So we'll be continuing with our lesson tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala, and I hope so the lesson was easy and it was easy to understand. We'll be continuing with the lesson tomorrow. Take good care. Allah Hafiz.